Good morning, people. Here is a quick contemplation for those of you who are spending the time thinking about engaging in your dialogue of life here, the dialogos, we'll say, embracing that I-thou living. Here's a contemplation that has been useful to me in kind of sorting out the issue. Okay? Uh, let's hypothesize that I live in a small village, maybe an indigenous fishing village, okay, some circumstance like that. And I'm walking down the beach, perhaps on the way to my canoe, or however you'd like to envision it. And one of the neighbor's kids is drowning in the surf, okay, because they slipped off a rock into a tide pool or something, and they're drowning out there. What is it that I do? Would there actually even be a question about it, or would the response that I might have be, in fact, automatic and conditioned? Would it even be a possibility that I might take a glance at the kid and just say, I don't really have time, I need to be at the canoe here in 15 minutes? I think most all of us in that environment, in those conditions, would feel compelled, in fact. I don't think that to lend as much aid as we possibly could. Um, and I think that response to help the child who's drowning would be nearly a conditioned response, nearly automatic. And I would even go so far to say that if you had made the choice to do otherwise, and if you had demonstrated that you were not the kind of person, or you were not the kind of person with the character to in fact act automatically, and it were to be made known that you walked past a drowning child and you did nothing, I think within the community, the repercussions that you would face for being such a monster would be really severe in that environment. I think in that environment, most of us would find ourselves acting basically of automatic compulsion with the will to lend aid, and if we encountered individuals that did not, the condemnation that we would, at least condemnation that we would lay at their feet would be severe. Okay? Let's chew on that for a second and see if you agree with me. Now, obviously, it's quite conspicuous for any of us that live in a major city, in anywhere in the developed world, that all of us are exposed to daily circumstances that are not far off the drowning child, if not exactly that of the drowning child. Certainly within our sphere of knowledge and influence, there are many, many, many examples of opportunities for us to lend aid to other where it would be of minimal consequence for us to do so, and most of us do very little. None of us do as much as we could. Now, there are other philosophers who have made this observation. I think it's Peter Singer, one who's done it probably most famously, although I'm not sure I like where he goes with it. I don't want to get into a bunch of moralizing about the issue or worry about whether human beings are evil or not because of their choices. I want to ask a more practical question. And that practical question is this: what has changed in the circumstances that has manifested a completely different innate response in what appears to be human nature? In one set of circumstances, in the small tribal environment, the response to lend aid and to be helpful, I would suggest, is nearly automatic. And I would say that in a major city within civilization, the response to ignore and to be apathetic is nearly automatic. We should take that observation seriously if um, what I'm observing here is at all correct. If I can reasonably make the case that within civilization itself is a necessity that brings forth a manifestation of apathy and lack of relation. Fundamentally, it's necessary as a means of survival within civilization to not care, to be alienated, to not be able to relate, to not have empathy. These are essential qualities that one must have living within civilization. If that's true, and that's the explanation for why one might feel compelled to act in one set of circumstances and display the polar opposite in other circumstances, if that's a reasonable assertion and you agree with me, well, this should really give you chills. I mean, those of you who have hung around here certainly know my maxim that I like to bandy around, which is the purpose of life is to live a life of purpose, and purpose is found in relation with other. Some of you are coming to kind of grok where that goes. But if we ask, you know, what the hell's going on here, and if we start to get the impression, like I have come to hold myself, that within civilization itself, as we do it at least, with its innate need to exploit fundamentally for its own existence, within that process, um, well, exist consequences that make relation, in fact, simply impossible. The uh, inhabitant of a civilization that is based on I-it relating and extortion and exploitation of resource for its existence requires its inhabitants to be blind. In fact, it requires them to be blind and very adept at disengaging from meaningful connection to other for their own survival. And if that's at all true, it's really worth asking whether or not it's worth it. Whether the comforts of civilization or the so-called securities of civilization or any of the rest of it, your fancy smartphone, any of that stuff, is worth the cost of giving up your ability to relate to other people, life, yourself, and the rest in a manner that's actually worth the term loving. I don't have a full answer for that, but the question is important and there needs to be an answer. And even if the answer isn't immediately forthcoming, or perhaps is a little fuzzy, or even personal, well, just to be conscious of the question is worth a great deal, because we have a bias that has been conditioned to us to simply assume that civilization itself is an unqualified good. Well, not always. For myself, I certainly know the further away I am from it, the more open my ability to relate becomes, and it becomes so not by a force of will, but simply automatically. It's an inquiry really worth your time. It could explain a great deal, and I thought I'd share it with you this morning. It's going to be a nice sunny day, and I hope to get out and get some projects done. Cheers.